So, to review the facts, more than the facts, to review where we are up to this point. So, what we've determined based on the Ramban up to this point is that there are two ideas in shofar. Okay, one idea in shofar is hechsher gufo, and one idea is hechsher shmo. What's hechsher gufo? It's the idea in the guf itself, meaning the animal, or the horn of the animal, must be one that could be used for shofar.
It's a question.
Let me take a further step back, so we'll go into the whole thing. Okay, so the issue is, the original question the Ritva had was, how could the Mishnah possibly say all shofros are kosher for Rosh Hashana usage, okay, except for the par, because it's called the Karen? What's the problem with that? That would imply that the par is a shofar that's puzzle. So that doesn't make any sense. How can it be? In other words, you can't create the klal of shofar and then say this is excluded from it because it's called Karen. That means, is it a shofar or is it not a shofar? Right? And that's what he says. He says, Miwa kasi kasha kevin the para lo ashkachan de ikri shofar. Right? So since the par is not called a shofar, memela imayit mikal shofar. Therefore, it should be excluded from the category of shofar. So why would the Mishnah say all shofaros are kosher except for para? That would imply that the par, the cow, is just a shofar that's puzzle. That doesn't seem to make any sense. Unless you say, all right, Johnny, is that clear?
Yeah.
Unless you say the following. Really, there's two shofars, or two ideas in shofar, if you want to be more precise. One idea is hechsher gufo. What's hechsher gufo? It means the horn is one that can be used physically, biologically, for what? For shofar. And there's hechsher shmo, which means halacha comes along and says, this thing right now, this horn, which could have the properties physically of being a shofar, as well as the halachic chaloshem of shofar. Okay? Of course, the only nafkamina is the case of the par. But anyway, so what's the Ritva saying, or what's the Ramban saying? He's saying like this. He's saying that if the horn is hollow, okay, that means it's a... If the horn is hollow, shofar mipi what? Guf, okay? The guf, all right? The horn physically. And if it's solid, all right? Okay, so he says, what would it be at that point? It's not a shofar, okay? But he says they are Karen. He says v'heim kulam Karen echad einu nikran shofar. It's one horn. You gotta be sensitive to his language. It's one horn, meaning a solid horn is defined as a Karen. It's now a Karen, and it's not. You can't call that a shofar. Okay, so that's step one. But what about the par? The par is what? It's hollow, right? So what must the par then be?
Shofar.
What? No. Oh, it is shofar b'guf. Correct. The par is shofar migufo, right. But what's it not?
Shofar b'shem.
Shofar b'shem. Why? Because the association with the Egos of, right? So that's his big move. His big move is to say that it's lacking the abstract halachic definition of shofar. Okay? Let me clarify. The halachic chaloshem shofar is rooted in the idea of hidur. Right. So, and what does hidur mean? It doesn't mean it's aesthetically beautiful. It means that it is something that is what? Philosophically abhorrent. Right. And if that exists, if it's philosophically lacking in hidur, so it can't be used as a shofar. Meaning, it doesn't acquire the halacha chaloshem of shofar.
Wait, real quick.
Cow. Let's just go in order. A cow. Okay, a cow horn. All right. You can't tell me that the horn itself is called a karen because it's hollow. So therefore, hechsher gufo means what? It's good as a shofar physically. But then the Ramban says, but one second. We also know that the idea, he says before, the shofar hu lashon hidur. Okay? It's a certain idea in beautification. Now, does the par have that idea? No. So therefore it does not have the shem shofar. Doesn't have the shem shofar. So therefore you can't use it.
No.
What about the fact that Mishnah says, Kol shofar Sharon, chus mishal para? It should have stopped right there. What does it say right after that? Bibnei Shu Karen. So therefore, there must be some reality to Karen here, which is a segue into his next kasha. But that's what he's saying. He's saying that as long as the like he says, the ulufisha para Karen shelah cholo. So since the cow horn, right, its horn is hollow, all right, yeshlo hechsher shofar begufo, all right. Therefore, physically speaking, it can be used as shofar. The aim psulo, but its defect ela machmas shmo shekaru hakasuv karen v'lo karu shofar, because the Torah calls it a karen. But what does it mean the Torah calls it a karen? It means that it's locking in what? What does karen mean? In the context of par, what does karen mean?
Yeah, abstract or goof.
In the abstract, what does a karen mean? Now you can say what you were saying.
That's a great question.
Right, well it doesn't have the shame shofar, which means it's locking in hidur.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what he says up to this point. So that's the Mishnah. The segue into the Ritva's final kasha, based on the Ramban.
That's what it should be, you would think.
Right, he's saying what should happen then is that there's, again, following in his conceptual order. Once I make the statements, well, okay, so now that we establish that the par does not get the shame shofar. Okay? Does not get a shame shofar, meaning it's not halakhically referred to as a shofar. Correct? What should therefore the next sentence in the Mishnah, or the next part of the sentence should say? Right. There's the inverse should be expressed in the Mishnah. Not b'nei shehu Karen, but rather b'nei shenikra Karen. I'll make sure everyone's clear about that question. This question is, what should the Mishnah have said at this point? B'nei shenikra Karen. But it's calling it a Karen, which would therefore imply let's tease our way backwards now, rewind in a sense, or unwind what we've done. What therefore, we go back to the original question now. Because then, if it's saying it is a Karen, that means Kol Shofros Sharon Chutz Mishapara.
It's not a real question.
Exactly. Well, the whole thing is making
it's not a real statement.
Exactly. Okay. So now he's trapped. In other words, you go back to the same problem you had to deal with. Right.
What is it?
Well, let me read the kasha. Umiu akasi kashale kevan sheim psulo migufo elamach mashmo. Since we're saying that the defect in the shofar and the par, right? It's not because of a physical issue with the horn. Rather, it's because it's lacking in the abstract halachic definition. Heichik tani mibnei shehu karen. How, in God's name, could the Mishnah have said it is a karen? Havilei lamasni mibnei shenikra karen. Rather, what should the Mishnah have said? Shenikra karen. It's the abstract definition of karen. V'kasav huzal, meaning the Ramban. The reason why he says v'kasav huzal here, by the way, just a side note, because he's quoting from the Ramban's drasha on Rosh Hashana, not from his halachic work. But anyway, what does he say? Kol shehu mechubor beguf behema karen shmo. Any horn that is attached to the animal, any animal, even an animal that you know in your mind will be able to be used as a halachic shofar, it's irrelevant. Any horn, when that animal's walking around the field, if the horn is attached to the animal, to the skull, what is it? It's a karen. Karen shmo. It's called karen. Ve'afilu shel yovel. Even the.
Why didn't you say that?
The Ramban says behema karen. Beguf behema karen shmo. Ve'afilu shel yovel. So even if the set is walking around the field and it has a horn, you can't call the shofar. Why? Because it's attached to the animal. Ella the lo nikra shofar, and it's not called a shofar. Okay, Ella kishinisakin bitzlush, until it's fixed through what? How do you fix the horn?
You hollow it out.
Before that, you got to cut it off the animal, right? You cut off the animal. And now, once it's cut off, you look at it, and it turns out it's hollow, which gives you Hashar Gofo, and it's Hidur, which gives you
Beauty.
Which is shame. Okay, you got both qualities. Beautiful. Umibnei shekaren shel para, and since the karen of the par, the Torah apostles it even after Talisha. Okay, meaning again, I remove the horn. It's hollow. I have hachshar gufo, but the Torah says even after I cut it, I want to hachshar shmo. I don't. But he's revising that. He's saying that once it's removed, the Torah says this thing can't be used. La'af la'achar tlisha nikra shmo karen kimo shahaya. It is called a karen, just like it's as much of a karen detached and hollow as when it was what?
Attached.
Attached and walking around the field. Let me just finish.
Well, good now.
Kolomar Mimnei she'adayin hu karen, since it is still a karen, kemo shahaya beschila be'odo mechubar, since it is still a karen, as if it was in the beginning when it was still attached to the animal. Ve'af al pi shepsulo mach mashmo, even though the defect does not come from the physical horn, but rather comes from the abstract lacking in hidur. Okay? Varehu ke'ilu karen megufo le'inyan shmo. Here's it's as if it is the karen, okay, of the guf le'inyan shmo. Okay? Le'inyan shmo of what? Of the shem shofar. Okay? Sha'af hu eino hidur l'shem. Because even it is not hidur l'shem. So say what you're saying again. Say it one more time.
So it says Mipnei shehu karen as opposed to Mipnei she'nikra karen, because the word it can't get rid of it. It
right.
always is that
It's
way.
always a karen. Okay, so now of course again that's why you needed the Torah to come in and introduce.
Yeah.
That's why he says the Torah calls it a karen. If you didn't have that, Chazal can never pull this off. But what we're saying is that the Torah with the fact that Torah comes and says it is a karen, right? So what you're saying is correct. You're saying that it never can shed that identity of karen. But then therefore what is a karen then? Well, in this context, there is two ideas of karen, right? But it's not what you thought. We thought that it was originally looking at the horn attached to the animal. What would you think? What kind of karen is it?
Karen Gufa.
Right, but obviously it's
Karen Shana.
right. So that's that must be what he's saying. He's saying that and now let's take our coins again, okay? The physical Haksha Gufo idea, okay? So a detached horn, right? If it is solid, is a physical karen, and if it's hollow, it is a physical shofar. But the other way to go is that if it's a horn that's attached to the animal, it is a
Shin Karen.
shin karen.
If it's
Right.
off the head,
It is what?
shofar. Not a shin Karen.
It is a.
Not a shin Karen. It's not
It
a
is
shin
a.
shofar.
It's a shame shofar, except for.
No, it's just not a shin Karen. Let's be safer.
What-
It's
once-
not a shin Karen.
Oh, okay. So let me be.
It
No.
lost
Once you detach, you're right. No, you're actually. I agree with you. Amazingly. When you detach the horn. Okay. When you detach the horn. No. He's right. What happens when you detach the horn? At that moment in time, you detach.
Lose the shape.
Right. But what is it now?
It loses shame Karen and becomes shame part.
No. What is it right now? No. He's right. What is it right now? No.
It's an ether.
We don't know.
NA.
What will determine whether it becomes a shofar or not?
If it can be hollowed out.
Hollowed out and
Hechsher.
Hidur. And what makes it hidur? It's not a.
Par.
That's it. That's his formula. That's his formula.
Wow.
All right. So now that we've established that, again, the unique idea of the par, the karen of the par. So the Mishnah Chaf Av Beis says shofar shel Rosh Hashana shel Yael
Wait a
Pashut
minute.
Chaf Av Beis.
Do we answer the question of
Look at the reason of the Ein Ketegar Nasa Snegar, right? Which is what? Which is that you can't use a par because the accuser defender thing, right? Okay. So the Gemara says, but one second, that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says the reason why you can't use the par is because of Karen, right?
Yeah.
So what's this, right? So the Gemara says, no. There's Tani Od Kamar, right? That this is the main reason, the Ketegor, right? And then the Mishnah, what the Mishnah is saying is secondary. Which, by the way, the astounding part of that, the more difficult part to answer is, how does the Gemara come along and tell us that the Mishnah is really knock out the Mishnah that way? Okay, fine. But what's it saying? And it's giving two reasons, but one's primary, one's secondary.
So the secondary reason is saying is
What the Mishnah says.
the whole Mishnah's idea is the literal.
Which reason's the better reason?
The Mishnah.
It is?
Because it has the fundamental principle carried all the way through to the physical nature of the shofar. It's unbelievable. It's way more complete.
Okay.
It has the first element of lacking hitter and
What?
other things.
How
Them together.
what do you mean they work together?
You need Shane River to complete.
No, let's just follow Yaakov's line of reasoning. I agree with him. Ein Ketegar Nasa Snegar makes a lot of sense insofar as what?
It means no hitter can emerge.
Ein Ketegar Nasa Snegar makes sense. No. Ein Ketegar Nasa insofar as what? As far as the is critical, essential idea of why I can't use a par. That is the reason why I can't use a par.
And that's why hitter.
That's the reason why I can't use a par. We haven't got to that yet. I can't use a par for that reason. Now,
Yeah. What?
Oh, the
now
Mishnah
what?
says why.
But what's it lacking? What's the reason lacking? What's the Mishnah have over the Gemara?
The Mishnah gives-
Ketegar Nasa Snegar is the essential reason, okay? But the Mishnah is giving its halachic expression. There's no mechanism to express Ein Ketega Nasa Snegar halakhically. So the essential reason is Ein Ketega Nasa Snegar. But what's the halachic expression? That's what the Mishnah does. But the Mishnah is dependent on Ein Ketega Nasa Snegar. Okay? Now, of course, the question becomes, what about the guilty one?
The who?
Right?
Yeah, what? Yeah, it did say
That I don't know. Saying that, why does it say that the reason of the Gemara is better, so to speak, than the Mishnah? What does it mean by better? It's better insofar as that the idea itself of what the Mishnah comes up with stems from Ein Ketega Nasa Snegar. Without Ein Ketega Nasa Snegar, the Mishnah can't exist. It needs that. But the thing is that Ein Ketega Nasa Snegar has no halachic expression to it. What's the halachic expression? What's the categories? How do we categorize this? What feature? What's the feature of the par? Well, because philosophically that's great. Has got to be tofes on something.
Nice.
Oh, that's beautiful. But what about the problem is? But then the next guy has guilty. He says no. He says the reason why he can't use a par is because of what? Because the par's got one layer of another layer. So why is that? Why is that reason better? Why is that reason primary and the Mishnah's reason secondary? What does it mean? No. What does it mean that Abaya's reason is superior to the Mishnah? He's not saying that the Mishnah there's a different idea than the Ein Ketega.
Less modification.
He's saying that ultimately he's isolating one specific reason.
Less dancing.
Right, exactly. Less dancing. No, ultimately, why is it puzzle? Because of Derek Dilaso. Because of guilty. That's why it's puzzle.
Yeah, so
there's that specific, precise thing as it makes it puzzle. But the Mishnah is dealing with the broader category.
The problem is though.